Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Transportation Committee of the Sacramento Area Council of Governments. Want to start out by just welcoming everyone back from our month retreat, our vacation, I should say. If hopefully everybody got to have some vacation. Hope everyone's staying healthy and safe given the recent rise of events in the Delta variant. And want to send all of our well wishes and thoughts to all those being impacted by the fires right now. Jessica, can we go ahead and start with some of the housekeeping items regarding the virtual meetings?
Yes, absolutely. So just a few housekeeping reminders before we get started. This meeting is being recorded and will be available to view on SACOG's website after the meeting. For any members of the public joining us today and who wish to make a comment, you can notify us by selecting raise hand, or if you're participating by phone, you can press *9. That will alert us that you have a comment to make. All public comment will be limited to 3 minutes. To help with timing, I'll give the speaker a 1-minute warning. And lastly, for our committee members, please remember to stay on mute until you are ready to speak. This will help eliminate any background noise. And when you are ready to speak, please use the raise hand feature, or again, press *9 if you're phoning in to alert the chair that you have a comment. Okay, we're ready for Pledge Allegiance and roll call on with your direction.
Thank you so much. Okay, can we pull the flag up? And if you all will stand and rise wherever you are and join me in the pledge. Hand over heart, ready, pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much, everybody. Jessica, could you go ahead and do the roll call, please?
Yeah, absolutely. Please answer when I call your name. Director Bradford?
Here.
Director Branscombe?
Here.
Director Desmond? Absent. Director Ledesma for Guerrero?
Here.
Thank you. Director Jennings?
Here.
Director Joyner?
Here, with the note that I've got a bailout at 11. I've got a meeting with Congressman McClintock to talk about wildfires, among many things. So
Thanks, Paul.
do that.
Director Saylor?
Here.
Thank you. Director Chenier?
Here.
Vice Chair Sander? Absent. Vice Chair Spokley?
Here.
Chair Soon?
Here.
And ex officio member Tacker for Benapol?
I'm here, thank you.
Thanks, welcome. We have a quorum.
And Jessica, this is Rich Desmond. I'm sorry I got on about a minute late there.
Thank you so much. I'll record that you're here.
Welcome, Rich, and everybody. Okay, we'll move on to public communications for items not on the agenda. Please, if there's any items you'd like to speak on are not on the agenda, please let us know. And Jessica, do you see anyone?
No one is raising their hand, and I have not received any public comment for this section.
Okay, thank you very much. Then we'll move on to the consent items. I have committee members have a consent calendar in front of me. Does anyone wish to speak on any of these items? Seeing none, let's go out to the public. Jessica, is there anyone that wishing to speak on any of these items on the consent calendar?
No public comment.
Okay.
Here soon, I'd like to make a motion to approve the consent calendar.
Okay.
Bradford will second.
Okay, motion by Vice Chair Spokley and seconded by Director Bradford. Roll call vote, please, Jessica.
Please indicate your vote when I call your name. Directors Bradford?
Aye.
Branscombe?
Aye.
Desmond?
Aye.
Ledesma?
Aye.
Jennings?
Aye.
Joyner?
Aye.
Saylor?
Aye.
Chenier?
Aye.
Thank you. Vice Chair Sander, absent. Vice Chair Spokely
Yes.
and Chair Soon.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay. Directors, we don't have any action items on this month's agenda, so we're going to move into our informational items. The first one up is Next Generation Transit Strategy for the SACOG Region Draft Final Report. Mr. Doherty, good morning.
Good morning, Chair and members of the committee. Chris Doherty with the Transportation Group here at SACOG. Happy to present this morning on the draft Next Generation Transit Study. This study began last summer and aims to articulate a long-term vision for transit for the Sacramento region. This project used both a qualitative and quantitative approach, ranging from one-on-one operator interviews to multiple data sources to take a look at the region's transit ridership and overall trips throughout the area. In this analysis, we used the SACOG Big Data Platform replica, which really gave us a great snapshot to look at how trips move around the region so we can better address them to these strategies. It also allowed us to look at travel patterns both pre-pandemic and during the pandemic, as we had real-time data. And through that process, some key findings were identified. Unsurprisingly, the post-pandemic travel patterns have shifted away from a downtown-centric commute pattern, but they've been replaced by multiple shorter local trips. We've seen less of a VMT reduction that we anticipated, just more of a shift in those trips. So the goal is to help transit plan to address those current trips versus the longer commute-centric trips that had been traditional. It also confirmed there's a steady decline in transit ridership in the region and how the pandemic exacerbated this trend. The study is envisioned to identify some of those key causes of that decline and to address them. Those factors include the fact that transit trips in our region are very slow compared to vehicle trips. Long regional trips across multiple transit agencies is difficult from the rider's perspective. And the transit delivery for low density suburban development is inefficient and fairly expensive. The strategies developed in this plan are designed to help our region's operators recover from the effects of the pandemic in the short term, but also set that long-term vision for our transit systems. In June, the strategies were presented to all three of the SACOG committees. They were organized into three primary categories of seamless user experience, planning and funding, transit design and delivery, and reducing mobility disparities in the region. The creation of these strategies has been guided by two stakeholder groups, the Policy Advisory Committee that is made up of the representatives from the community groups and business organizations around the region, and the Technical Advisory Committee, which is comprised of transit operators in the region. About a month ago, 4 weeks ago, we circulated the draft plan to our regional stakeholders for comments. Some of the comments that we've received back are things like some requests on or requested adjustments on some key performance indicators to better address rural operators. Emphasize the need to improve accessibility to transit stops and facilities throughout our region. To add more details about mobility hub concepts and how they can differ across the region, and include some additional rural transit case studies. I will add, not all of the comments are in from our transit operators, and I will update the board when we present later on this month verbally on any additional comments that we received. Only one concern from operators came out of the study, and that was primarily focused around the increase in frequencies of the short-range transit planning process. The study had proposed a 2-year cycle of our SRTPs. And after speaking with several of our transit agencies and our own internal staff, I'm proposing that we edit that strategy to every 4 years with a minor update in the middle. The goal of that strategy was to align the planning processes with our funding round to better and our transit asset management system. So we have a better idea of the regional transit needs as we go into our funding round. But we think with this strategy, we can still address that need with a minor update in the middle. So we do expect to make these edits on the plan and bring this back to the committee and the board in September for final adoption. And with that concludes my presentation. I'm available for any questions and comments.
Thank you, Chris. Are there any questions from the board members?
A quick question.
Branscombe, go ahead.
I've briefly reviewed the printed material that accompanies this report. There's a lot there. What would be the 3 or 4 bullet points that would be the highlights of this report if you had to convey it to somebody in an elevator ride?
Some things
what are the key takeaways you want me to have?
I'm sorry?
What are the key takeaways?
Well, I think that the key issues I think that are affecting transit right now are, on average, a transit trip in our region is approximately an hour. That is considerably longer than any trip in a comparable vehicle ride. That is detrimental, I believe, to transit ridership in the region. That's a big takeaway. That in our predominant land use pattern of low density suburban development is very hard to serve with a 40-foot bus. We need new ways to serve our existing land patterns and then change our development patterns that are more transit supportive in the areas where there are opportunities to do so.
And you mentioned that the transit rides are shorter now, and you do not have the same amount of ridership into the business district and government district in Sacramento. Have you noted any impact of all of the federal money being federal and support money and unemployment money and what have you? Because for example, I go to my local dry cleaner, and I used to be able to get 2-day service on shirts, and now it's a week because they can't get anybody to come back to work. Have you considered that impact on ridership?
We have. As I mentioned, the commute patterns have changed a little bit. I don't think we fully normalized to where they're going to be. So we're still watching that. We're working pretty closely with the state of California for their return to work patterns and monitoring our travel patterns to help our transit operators better plan for the service that will normalize out of the pandemic. But we do believe that some of the employment things will equalize and people will return to work, and we want to provide options for how they get there.
Now, these are difficult issues. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any more questions from the directors?
Chair Soon, this is Rich Desmond. I have a question.
Yeah, sure, Director Desmond, go ahead.
Thanks, and thanks for the report. It is remarkable how the pandemic has, in a lot of ways, kind of blown up a lot of transit models and assumptions based on commuting patterns and how much that's changed. So I'm very eager to hear some innovative ideas. And one, obviously, my district is a suburban district, and people are relying more and more on the smart ride type model, app-based services for transit. What are some of your ideas, or I guess how do you see things playing out with transit maybe being more competitive both economically and from a convenience perspective with the Uber and Lyft? How do you see that app-based component of transit evolving?
I think we're seeing right now some shifts in the TNCs, which are the Uber and Lyfts of the world. We're seeing some considerable cost increases and things happening there that are going to have them start shifting their model. These are largely industries that are currently funded through venture capital and have not made a profit in their history yet. So we understand that those models will be shifting in the future. We've had a tremendous success in our region for microtransit, for more flexible on-demand services to address some of our land use patterns. And those, there's a real opportunity there with microtransit, especially with the data that comes with it, that can help us identify and create new fixed route transit routes based on ridership from the smart ride systems. So because when people request their ride, that data is recorded. So it can be used as a nice interim step to establish some transit ridership, and then take that data and then realign a new route to support that ridership in the future. So there are a lot of ways that we are kind of rethinking some of how we deliver transit. That would be one concrete example.
All right, thank you.
Great. Any other questions from the directors? I'm gonna look. Do you see any, Jessica? Any hands up? Okay.
No.
Okay. I do want to just add, Chris, well, a couple of things. First, your implementation recommendations. Do you have a timing on this, or is this dependent upon if you're able to obtain funding from the federal government?
So the short-term round of strategies are designed to be implemented within 0 to 5 years, but they are funding dependent. We do have an opportunity right now with some of the recovery dollars and the discretionary share of that SACOG can use to start to really start some of these processes and kick them off. What we are expecting, we're working with the Sacramento urban zone operators to develop a list of some of those strategies to move forward with that $9.2 million we do have from the discretionary recovery dollars to move some of these forward. And we're working with that group now as we speak. So we're hoping to really take some of those that low-hanging fruit and really get it in motion so we can start this process.
Thank you. And I think you're going about it in a prudent way, seeking more data, trying to pull more of the riders. This issue, I think, is very volatile right now, given the pandemic, given the technologies that are changing, as you mentioned earlier about Uber, Lyft. But it's definitely something that we at SACOG and with staff and the directors, we started this conversation a few years ago. But I think it's a worthwhile conversation and a worthwhile endeavor. Because again, our region, as you noted in the report, is going to grow by over 600,000 people over the next 20 or so years. And so how do we accommodate that in trying to be forward thinking and planning for a system that, won't be outdated by the time, it comes. Planning for, the next generation of transit, I think, is a worthy conversation. For my own intuitive perspective, I would just say that I think we need, a backbone infrastructure that will get us to the different regions, whether it's going to Davis or Rancho Cordova or Roseville or Yuba County or Elk Grove, being able to mapping out those key destinations with backbone infrastructure, and then from there figuring out how do people get around using mobility, are the apps and the microtransit options to get around those areas. I think is a useful strategy. But I look forward to future conversations about this. I think Director Branscombe started asking a lot of great questions too. So I think there's a lot more conversations to be had. And again, going back to your implementation recommendations, there's a lot of data planning, and so that task force, I look forward to seeing that come to fruition and just hearing more data to inform our discussion and the eventual decisions to be made.
Great. And if I can clarify one point I made, we do have for the funding moving forward, we have kind of two pots of funding moving forward. We have our standard annual transit 5307 discretionary money moving forward that we're using our that you have reviewed some of the guidelines and criteria for already. And that's a little over $7 million. And on top of that is the Recovery Act dollars that are coming through that are about $9.2 million, excuse me. So I want to just clarify that we have a couple opportunities to move some of these forward. And just to clarify, because it's a little confusing right now with the multiple pots of money moving forward, but there are two distinct processes moving forward a little differently right now that you will see come, I think, believe when we adopt this plan in September.
Okay, great. Look forward to more conversations.
And Chair Soon, if I could, I'm glad Chris answered your question. You know, he talked about these kind of implementation strategies, 0 to 5 years. Honestly, I think we'd like to make that 0 to 12 months. And we have opportunities. We have opportunities because of the actions this committee has taken, because of, as Chris said, recovery dollars. And to connect it to the other presentation you'll get in a little bit after Victoria presents from Adrian Moretz about our innovative mobility framework. There's actually a really nice synergy and opportunity here that we can get to implementation quickly, at least beginning to pilot and to test some of these things using the sort of the Civic Lab learnings and the model and our innovative mobility framework. So stay tuned for that. After you get a couple of active transportation, bike, pedestrian presentations, we'll come back around to this. And we think there's some nice connecting of the dots here.
Yeah. Great. Look forward to it. You know, but as you know, like also the environment is changing. You know, a lot of state governments were going to go back at least a couple days a week, right? But they're still holding that off. So I think, you know, in the report, I mean, and all of you acknowledged earlier that things are still kind of settling out on what that new normal is going to look like. So I think everything's going to have, you know, the timing is going to work well as we're continue to gather data and you know, coupled with how the environment, you know, shakes out in the future. We look forward to the future presentations. Any other comments from the directors? Okay, seeing none, let's go to our next item. And item 5, update on the 2021 Active Transportation Program augmentation. Good morning, Ms. Cacciatore.
Good morning, and thank you for the introduction. I am here to provide an update on the potential augmentation for the 2021 Active Transportation Program. As a quick recap, Active Transportation Program is competitive transportation funding that is implemented at both the state and the regional level to increase biking and walking through infrastructure investments, programs, and planning efforts. Back in June, the Transportation Committee recommended to the board that the board delegate authority to this group to act quickly on approving any potential additional active transportation program funding. That was because there was a lot of momentum to include $500 million in the state budget to fund further down the list of the active transportation programs that had just competed for funding. There were still a number of high-performing projects at both the state and the regional level that we did not have enough funding to cover, and there was a lot of momentum to get extra funding from this one-time budget surplus. While everything was on track, it then went off track at the last moment. And while the $500 million is still identified in the state budget, there is a requirement for additional trailer bill language for that funding to be authorized for both the state to spend that money on active transportation program projects that have already competed, and thus for the region to spend money on projects that have already competed. We are in a bit of a wait and see mode to see if this will work itself out. The legislature is currently on recess, so that while they are on recess, they are not able to develop trailer bill language. They will be back in session on August 16th, and staff will continue to monitor developments with the legislature, whether they pass any trailer bill language. The next big milestone would be whether they develop trailer bill language specific to active transportation program that makes it out of appropriations by August 27th. So the next big milestone we'll keep an eye on is August 27th to see if it looks likely that we may be able to get the additional active transportation program funding. We will stay in contact with California Transportation Committee staff too, as far as what timelines they think we would possibly need to meet if that trailer bill language is to come into effect. And we will stay in touch with the impacted local agencies that may or may not stand to receive additional funding if the trailer bill language goes through. So again, a lot of ifs. We will remain optimistic that we will see additional transportation funding come through with trailer bill language, both for active transportation program and other impacted transportation funds. And we wanted to close the loop since you had originally expected to act on a funding list at this meeting.
Okay, thank you, Victoria. We'll keep our fingers crossed. Director Saylor, I see your hands up.
Thank you, Chair Soon. So Victoria, a couple of questions for you. First question is, what is the August 27th date? Is that a date that's apparently a legislative calendar due date? And I'd like to know what that trigger is. And then the second, is there who is working on the trailer bill language? Who is the author's offices on the Assembly and Senate side who are engaged in this, if anyone?
You want me to take it, Victoria?
Oh, that would be excellent. Thank you.
Here's what we know, and it's it is bigger than just the active transportation program. Here's what I would tell you, trying to do the shortest story I can on this. Part of the reason this all got hung up is negotiations of the high-speed rail funding. So there's $4.2 billion in play for high-speed rail. There's a lot of back and forths on that money, on another 2.5 that so far has been for the TIRCIP program, Transit Intercity Rail. There was $1 billion in that 2.5 for LA Olympics, and it is all in play. So in some ways, this active transportation program funding, I would say, is it's part and parcel of the bigger negotiation. And Director So, when you say who's writing the language or doing the negotiations, I would either the governor or his representatives, the speaker, other key people in the legislature. And we are trying to wrap our arms around this, honestly, not just for ATP, but to make sure that there isn't some sort of a Southern California larger funding play that we get shut out of. And that's a stay tuned on this one. The budget, as you know, was a pretty untraditional this year.
Great. James, what's the 27th? What is that?
I don't remember exactly, but they basically, as Victoria said, they come back the 16th. I mean, they have to kind of make a deal if they're not already making one as we speak. And so, they're, as you know, they're out in mid-September. I think they're going to try to get this done, I would think, this month, and that I'm guessing that's what that deadline is. Certainly, we could follow up with you with more details.
Thank you.
Thank you, Don. Any other questions from the directors? All right, seeing none. Thank you very much, Victoria. Although I think you're still up for the next item. Update on the network identification for the Sacramento Regional Parks and Trails Strategic Development Plan.
Yes, and the Sacramento Region Parks and Trails Strategic Development Plan is a regional effort to identify the existing planned and possible trail connections that are going to connect residents to each other and achieve regional outcomes that surround our goals of economic vitality, environmental justice, health, safety, recreation, and all ages and abilities networks. We are in the process of working with local agencies to identify the different trail segments that will comprise of this network. This is more of an item to ensure that it is on everyone's radar that this is in progress, but it is moving quickly. We anticipate developing a draft network to share in October and looking for approval of the regional trail network in November of this year. I'd like to point to attachment B, which has the identified regional outcomes that were reviewed at the June committees, both here and with the Land Use and Natural Resources Committee, and then sent on to the board as a receive and file. And it's a lengthy process where we will be working with agencies either one-on-one or SACOG with a small number of cities or city and counties to identify where are the areas for cross-jurisdictional connections, and then also identifying which trail segments they have that meet these performance outcomes. So with that, I'd like to pause for any questions you may have about the ongoing work.
Thank you, Victoria. Are there any questions from the directors? I have a quick question, and then I think we have a couple public comments on this as well, correct? Okay, I just was wondering how can jurisdictions ensure that they're aligned with the performance targets? Is that working with you, and how will they know?
That is part of working with myself, with Dustin Foster and Maricela Salazar. We're a part of the team that is working with the agencies to talk through how different trail segments are contributing towards different goals based on the performance metrics that were reviewed back in June. So again, attachment B. There are different indicators that are included as part of those performance metrics. It's not expected that any one trail is able to provide the safe alternative route to a high collision corridor and connect to community centers. It's not anticipated that something's going to tag all 6 goals, but we're working with agencies to discuss on a one-on-one basis the way that their different trail segments contribute towards those goals. So they will have the chance to discuss it with us directly.
Great. Yeah, I think it's going to be a great amenity for the region. So I hope everyone will work with you and the rest of the team to make sure we can meet those performance targets. I just want to ask the directors one more time if there's any questions before I go to I know there's some public comment on this one. Okay, seeing none. Victoria, would you mind, I think you have them with you, reading the comments that we received?
I'm happy to read them, Chair Sue.
Oh, I'm sorry, Jessica. Yeah. You have them.
No worries. So yes, we did receive public comment from Tim Vile, who is part of the American River Bike Control. He's also a writer and a photographer. His comments are, what will the regional trails plan impacts be on the current east-west freeway, the American River Bike Trail? Already crowded and underfunded, we suggest American River Parkway mitigation steps and trail improvements should be a part of the regional plan. And 2, he says, bicycle safety patrols and equestrian patrols should be part of the conversation, such as those on the American River Parkway, the American River Bike Patrol, Folsom, and potential development of similar patrols in Rancho Cordova and other cities. The American River Bike Patrol is delighted to share ideas and collaborative solutions. That concludes his comments.
Okay, Great. Well, we definitely appreciate his willingness to help out and assist. So if SACOG staff finds that useful, please reach out to him. Victoria, do we have an answer to his question at this time? If not, it's okay, but I just thought I'd ask.
Yes, we have some response to it. We also appreciate the comments, especially any programmatic options for increasing safety of all trail users. Through our regional planning efforts, we are examining different programmatic options that can increase trail safety while maintaining a welcoming environment for all trail users. These are typically implemented at the local level, so it is something that we encourage local agencies to discuss with the lens that you maintain a welcoming environment for trail users. As far as the other comments about the current east-west freeway, we have anecdotal evidence or anecdotal stories about the high trail usage. We are still working on quantifying the extent of current trail usage to determine what types of impacts there are. Without having that data, it is rather difficult to identify the appropriate mitigation steps. I would like to use this time to promote the receive and file item on today's agenda about the Every Roll and Step Counts program, where we loan bike ped counters to agencies. I'd also like to note that Sacramento Regional Parks is a partner on our data collection project, and they have 3 pieces of longer term bike ped equipment that are counting equipment that they are in the process of installing. They're doing the groundwork for that. So we are on our way to establishing better quality data about the level of use and how we can also measure the impacts of these regional trail connections on trail use, and perhaps identifying some of the information about peak times that could help us mitigate any possible impacts.
Great, thank you.
Chair Soon,
Yeah.
if I can just top off the item here, and as you know, Victoria's done such great work on this, working with a lot of your staff. This is the moment in this effort now where we really are, as Victoria just presented to you, we're trying to build this regional connected trail network together. We do not want this to be seen as or referred to as the SACOG trail network, that this is our region's trail network. And to do that, we're going to have to get all 28 cities and counties, your parks districts. We need to do this together and build it together. As you all know, there's many great elements. Victoria just mentioned the American River Trail, but there's also many gaps, and we need to close those gaps, identify them, close them, win funding for them, and this is part of how we do that. So stay tuned, but this is a critical period right now where we will work staff to staff, but just so you're all aware. The second thing I would just say, and I was just reminded of this, was I was back east this summer over July. And I would ask people, where should we go? What should we go see? What's great in your city here, your town? The trail network was the place that we referred to. Columbus, Ohio, Greenville, South Carolina, this incredible Swamp Rabbit Trail, and the Beltline in Atlanta, Georgia, which is an old freight rail that circles Atlanta, that's now being turned into a trail. We got into a restaurant one night in Atlanta and it was absolutely packed. And we said, is it always this crowded? He said, well, ever since they finished the Beltline, this is a remarkable transformation of neighborhoods, economies, local serving economies. And it's a spark that I think we would be well served to grab here in our region. So just kind of putting that emphasis, I know we presented this to you and Victoria has done great work keeping you updated, but just how important we think this is for the region. So thanks.
Yeah, no, thank you, James, for that reminder and emphasis. And yes, Victoria has been doing great work on it. And, the survey you guys pushed out earlier too, to try to, ping all the residents throughout the region to get their input. Really appreciated that. Director Desmond, I see your hand up.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Soon, and
thank you, James and Victoria, for this. You know, as the county obviously oversees the 23 miles of American River Parkway, and I agree with you, James. First and foremost, we need to close those gaps. But Victoria, you've given me some great ideas on some of the support. We got to remember we need to have the supports, proper supports on these trails to both encourage ridership and know that people's experience on these trails will be a safe one, one where they're going to have support. And I can tell you that the bike patrol that we have along the American River Bike Trail has been terrific. And I hope this might provide us with an opportunity to expand that not only along the American River Parkway, but on some of these other trail segments. So you've given me some good ideas. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Director Desmond. Those are good points as well. Any other comments from the directors? Okay, seeing none. I'm all of a sudden thinking I can't wait to have an e-bike so I can, because I'm not in good enough shape to ride all the way around, but I'm going to leverage the e-bike program and go stop off at some restaurants in Davis. Okay, I'm going to move to the next item, item 7, Innovative Mobility Program Framework. Ms. Moritz.
Morning, committee members. Adrienne Moritz, your SACOG staff. Give me just a moment here while I share my screen with you.
Sure. Good morning.
There we are. Just Jessica, I want to confirm that you can see my screen.
Yep, we could see it.
Yep. Great. Well, good morning again. We are presenting today the next 2-year framework for the Innovative Mobility Program. It's for discussion today. This program supports grants and funding for member jurisdictions and partners. And it's all in an effort to reduce car trips, really to get us closer to our greenhouse gas reduction targets that are set forth in our long range transportation and land use plan, the MTP SCS. So the funding for this program was approved last September as part of our regional funding round. And just as a reminder, we do have a luncheon on this topic today for our committee members, where we'll be taking a deeper dive into the background of the program, how it's evolved over time, and the impact on our local members. But today the focus is on this new 2-year framework. So it is true, when you think innovative mobility, you might be tempted to think, oh, it's only the shiny new technology, the autonomous shuttles of the world. And we have launched some of them at Sac State, so that is part of our program. But it's also microtransit that Chris was talking about during Next Generation Transit. It's, that's happening in Knights Landing in Yolo County right now. It's also riding your bicycle during May is Bike Month. And it's also the realization that, we have to adapt to travel patterns, like you were saying, Director, soon. We're not in a typical situation right now. And so travel patterns are not normal, but we need to adapt to them as people's preferences and behavior changes. So our program really lives at the intersection of these 3 entities, where existing infrastructure is our roads and bridges, what's already there, but it's also our existing transportation network and the systems we have in place now, so public transit. New technology does mean the Ubers and Lyfts of the world, but it also means our research partners, our universities, utilities, property owners. So Director Desmond, when you're talking about, microtransit being successful in the county and how Uber and Lyft and all these new technologies play in, this is really the space where we do that. We try to work with these vendors and entities and these up and coming tech companies and not against. And so we've done some projects in that space through this program. And then market and social forces is actually something we've added to this Venn diagram of sorts since we developed this in 2019. And that's because this program has drastically changed just in the past year and a half. So we adapt to federal and state policy changes and initiatives. Our programming is really defined by the current state of the region. Like we have been talking about the regional telework pilot we launched during the pandemic. And we also need to incorporate and have been incorporating the work of our Race, Equity, and Inclusion Working Group, the work they're doing to dedicate funds for projects in underserved communities. So we'll talk a little bit later about the Engage, Empower, and Implement program. So that's a little bit about kind of the foundation of the program, why we do it. This program is important because it's a strategy in our MTP-SCS for reducing greenhouse gas reduction, meeting our greenhouse gas reduction target. So we live in this space of two major policy initiatives within the MTP: increasing transit, walking, and biking, and shortening vehicle trips. This program is directly responsible for 1 to 2% of our 19% greenhouse gas reduction target. And we're also a strategy in the region's economic prosperity strategy. So all of this, is great because we are trying to reduce vehicle miles traveled and meet these targets. But we also know that people really like to experience their community outside of the car. People like to walk and bike and try these new technologies. And so that's another reason that this program is important. So just a little bit of context as we get to the here and now. This program's been funded at SACOG for over 2 decades. It's really over the past 5 or 6 years that we have transformed the program. We have made it way more performance-based. We've incorporated a lot of innovation and new partners. We have also incorporated a lot more competitive funding opportunities and expanded the programs and grants that we offer to new and different partners, including our member jurisdictions. So that brings us to recently. And so if you look at the left-hand screen of this timeline, in September of 2020 is when the board adopted the 2020 SACOG funding round. And in that $6 million was dedicated to this program, Innovative Mobility Program, $3 million per year for 2 years. So the framework we're talking about today is the 2-year allocation that the board dedicated in last year's funding round. So since that adoption and now, we have continued the work of our program, really trying to do that in the spirit of recovery of COVID-19. So we again launched the Regional Telework Initiative. We expanded our Guaranteed Ride Home program. We are developing a performance measurement template, and we've conducted now 2 virtual May is Bike Month campaigns that you may have participated in. So we've been developing this framework, getting feedback from our stakeholders, so jurisdictions, partners, transit agencies, also having a lot of discussions internally as SACOG project teams. And then we'll start implementing this right away, the strategies within this plan. So that kind of brings us to today, which is the framework that we'll be talking about. Really, the mission of the program is to increase transportation options and reduce vehicle miles traveled. We want to make sure that people know about their options, and if the infrastructure is there, it's the easy choice for all these types of trips. I see my video lagging just a bit, so I'm going to turn my camera off to preserve my audio here. But the goals we have set forth in this program are quite ambitious. So we are trying to reduce VMT. We are trying to leverage new technology and partners and private sector investment where feasible. We do want to increase access to our existing services. So this is the existing infrastructure, right? We want to make sure people are using public transit and the bike share system we have now and making smart use of our existing roads. We really want to see it set ourselves up for success in informing the next round of the MTP, which is starting now. You'll hear more and more about our upcoming MTP and how we need to meet our greenhouse gas reduction targets. And we also want to support policies that benefit underserved communities. So how do we do that? The framework that we are bringing forward today for discussion at a high level is split almost in half. About 50% of the funding is for direct funding to members and partners, including grant opportunities, and the other half is projects and programs. So before we kind of dive in to each of these strategies and the programs within, I do want to note that, this is a unique program in that it's not one total grant opportunity, it's a series of projects and programs. And so as we develop and launch each of these things that you see within each of these 4 strategies, we will consistently bring them back to you as committee members for feedback, for review, for action if necessary. So that's things like the program design, partnerships, consultants, grant guidelines. The most recent example we have is the telework pilot, where we've been coming to you as committee members where feedback and approval is necessary. So this is not the only opportunity to provide feedback and guidance on this framework. It's really the first opportunity. So I will be referencing attachment B, which is a kind of layout of each of the 4 strategies. So just to guide you through how to read and look through this document, attachment B, there are the 4 strategies. So at the top, you'll see the strategy and an overall outcome. And then there's a table underneath. On the left-hand side of the table is the proposed program, and then a very brief overview of that program. So a sentence or so describing what it will do. Then we have example projects that could come out of these programs. They're not set in stone. We want to make clear that they are examples, but something that you might see that could come out of these programs. And then as we move to the right-hand side of that table, you'll see the estimated costs and then match. So internal funding from SACOG or outside funding, and then a timeline estimate. So I'm going to walk through these one by one. Please do interrupt me if there are questions as I go through each of these. So starting with strategy 1, that's where we want to implement SACOG's priority strategies, projects, and grants using our Civic Lab program, what James mentioned during the next generation transit item. So Civic Lab is our way to launch projects by addressing challenges first, then exploring all of the opportunities available to us, and then developing a pilot that really takes into consideration the needs of the users of these systems. So Civic Lab has looked like a 10-month intensive program with monthly workshops and homework assignments, but it has also looked like a 4-part virtual housing series. So how Civic Lab looks in each of these projects might be different, but the point is we want to use this process, really thinking challenge first, to help implement some of the priority plans that we have at SACOG. So of course, the one you just heard about is next generation transit that Chris presented earlier today. We have been collaborating with transit agencies and our internal project team to really understand how our program might serve as an implementer for some of these short-term outcomes. Yes, ideally 0 to 12 months would be our goal, but how can we work with the transit agency, as they're focusing on operations, as they're also figuring out what projects might be used for the upcoming funding opportunities? How can we complement that? How can we help support them through our Civic Lab process? And so we really want to gear ourselves up to implement the projects that we have at SACOG to support through the Civic Lab program. Another example is Engage, Empower, Implement, or EEI. That's kind of the second project listed under strategy 1. This is a program that was dedicated funding in the 2020 funding round. This program has not yet been developed, so the timeline comes later in the second year of this framework. But again, we want to be able to support the pilot projects or mobility projects that come out of this work, especially focused in underserved areas. So we're kind of teeing ourselves up here as we roll into strategy 2, which is the second strategy on the first page of attachment B, which is creating a pipeline of implementation. What that means is we want to tee ourselves up to be ready to implement as these programs and projects get ready. An example is the pricing pilot. So that's a grant we recently received from Caltrans, and that is to develop the framework for a pilot, but it's not the pilot itself. So how could this program help, even at a small scale, implement some sort of pilot after the legwork is done through that grant? How might we be able to support some of the implementation or outreach that Victoria just mentioned in the Trails Plan? So the first strategy is about implementing the priority projects and grants that you have been focusing on right now. Strategy 2 is about teeing ourselves up to serve as implementers as we kind of move through these plans and projects. Then moving on to strategy 3, which is on the second page of attachment B. this is allocating funding to our members and partners. So regional challenge grants are something we had envisioned in 2019, where we wanted to provide a flexible opportunity. So instead of us proposing guidelines or focus areas for a grant, we would let our partners, jurisdictions, transit agencies, community-based organizations help us figure out those focus areas, and then provide them small grants to pilot test some of those solutions. And then on a more individual level, the second project in this strategy, personalized trips campaign, is really about maximizing the platforms we already have. SAC Region 511, it's a trip planning platform. How do we maximize that and focus on the individual traveler, provide them custom trip plans as their travel patterns are changing on the daily, and then reward them for taking efficient modes of travel, so biking, walking, or teleworking. And then finally, strategy 4, this is our core programming. So these are our tried and true VMT reducers. They are things like reporting existing van pools in the region to the National Transit Database. So really getting a funding flow directly back from doing that, van pools that already exist. This is also about building up performance measurement. We've gotten a lot stronger at measuring performance and the outcomes of our projects, but it's been so far on a project by project basis. So now we're developing an overall template, a consistent template that can be used by our recipients and then easily be collated up for our data team to use in modeling for the MTP. So finally, just a few notes on what we've heard so far on this feedback, and then I'll pause for questions. Really, we've had a lot of ideas, which is exciting. So we've had 2 open houses, if you will, where members and member jurisdictions and other partners could come and give us feedback, ask questions. We've also sent our framework for peer review from other national experts around the country. So this is everyone from LA Metro to Central Texas Transit Authority. And we will be taking this to our Transit Coordinating Committee and other entities just to continually get feedback, because the benefit of this program is it's adaptable. So we've gotten a lot of ideas so far, everything from fare-free transit, more about microtransit, electric car share expansion, how we get part-time riders in van pools, electric bike subsidies. So we have really started to see our stakeholders be invested in this and really trying to see themselves in the program. So that's really exciting. So with that, again, this is kind of our first conversation. We'll start bringing more and more of these program and project designs to you. I'll pause for questions.
Thank you, Adrian. Any questions from the, oh, I see Vice Chair Spokley's got his hand up. Go ahead, Vice Chair.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chair Soon. I during the presentation, I'm not sure if it was on video or not, but I'll go back and check it out. A bird flew into my house and hovered right above me, a hummingbird, and went back out. My daughter painting over here freaked out. So hopefully that was on video, because I ducked down and I'm like, anyway, I do have questions though related to this program. We have implemented some new programs, a new program in the city limits here in Auburn that I think fall pretty well into this funding opportunity. They're related to us realizing that we have a problem, down at the confluence where trailheads are, and a lot of activity occurs over the summertime. In fact, so much activity occurs down there that people illegally park up Highway 49 coming up out of the canyon, creating a very dangerous situation. So we are utilizing, I think, our electric buses, but I've got an email into our transit manager to confirm. I know some of our buses and the routes are serviced by our electric buses, but the idea is to keep people parking up here, relieve the parking situation down there, and we run the program from Friday through Sunday. We'd love to expand the program. Is this, Adrian, a program that would kind of fall into the category for this ATP funding?
Yeah, thanks, Director Spokley. So as a bicycle rider myself, I appreciate, I'm very familiar with the constraints at the confluence. So yes, what we might be able to support in this program is something like promoting that service to people. I mean, have the existing platform, SAC Region 511. That's a good place to at least list that as an opportunity. Some of those things we can do here and now, and we'll connect with your staff to start promoting that existing service. A place where a project like this might fit is in strategy 3, when I talked about the regional challenge grants. So of course, our goal are to reduce car trips and just explore new types of services. And so we'll be building out the focus areas for that. We've heard a lot of similar types of questions, ideas, or types of services like you just mentioned. So I think that's a good place where that pilot might fit. We have that timeline set to January right now, but we'll start conversations with partners and stakeholders over the next few months. Similarly, strategy 1, where we're trying to implement some of these short-term outcomes for the next generation planning study, that could be another place. Since it's a transit service, it's an interesting one since it's recreation focused, but it could definitely reduce car trips, which is our goal, right? So there's a few places I think this project could fit, yes.
Any other questions from directors?
I have a quick follow-up. I was
Yeah,
trying
go
to wait
ahead.
for the clock to stop dinging, but it was too long of a pause. So the other programs that I think all of our member agencies are going to be very, focused on is some of the electric charging opportunities. And it sounds like this program might be well suited for some of those fundings. Is that correct, Adrian?
Well, if you're talking about the infrastructure, building or installing a charging system, this program is not the best fit for that, because we are not, even though infrastructure, you assume it means roads and bridges, right? Our program is not designed typically to do things like install chargers. However, other supporting components of that, like outreach or connections or that sort of thing, could definitely fall into this program. And we had mentioned, we put a line item in Green Means Go as a potential strategy. One of the main components of Green Means Go is to electrify trips. So there's lots of collaboration that we'll be doing over the next few years.
Great, that makes sense. I think the outreach is one of the things that we're struggling with. The ridership, we've got a number of stops and pickup points where we focus on all of the hotels in our area, even hotels outside the city limits. We're picking up folks there and providing that shuttle down to the confluence. And likewise with the charging stations, any of the assistance that a small community like mine can get as far as getting the word out would be fantastic. So look forward to working with you guys on this program.
Great, thank you.
Director Branscombe.
Thank you. I've lived in urban and less than urban environments, and I'm wondering how realistic it is to really think that car trips can be significantly reduced. Is there any kind of study underway into the actual feasibility of accomplishing that? There's a lot of energy being directed at that objective, but I'm worried about the feasibility of actual achievement, and to the extent it is achieved, would it be significant? I've got a second question, but I'd like to hear a response on that.
Yeah, that's a good and big question, Director Branscombe. I think in terms of our program, we live in the small scale, short-term, low-cost pilot test strategies. So we can test and learn from these smaller scale efforts trying to reduce car trips. And if successful, then we can take those lessons learned and scale them up, get other types of funding, expand them to different areas in the region, really just share the lessons learned with other partners. If they're not successful, that's okay, because we have not invested millions of dollars or significant infrastructure in these, efforts. So I know that's not a solid answer, but our program really has transitioned or transformed to fit these pilot projects over the past few years. So that way, if something is successful, we can really take those lessons and encourage or support scaling of that. And if not, we are not at a big loss. So that's the short I would add. I don't know if Casey or James would.
No, that's actually a good answer. Ever since Henry Ford introduced the automobile to, well, really the world in mass production, people have gotten in their cars and gone places because people enjoy doing that. And it's not just for getting groceries. Sometimes it's for recreation or just to have something to do. And at some point, it'd be interesting to know if the feasibility could be measured. In other words, we'd love to achieve this, but we only think we can achieve this. And that means where should we really direct efforts in improving mobility? Second question I had is with respect to electric vehicles. I just read something this morning that the major automobile manufacturers all have a goal of collectively having 50% of their sales be with electric vehicles by 2030. It's not that far away. And I'm familiar with the change in the pattern of electricity production. And it used to be, 30 years ago, there was abundant electrical generation at night. Well, that's no longer the case. Nuclear power plants have been taken offline, and we're relying more and more on renewables, which have diurnal patterns. If the sun's out, great, you've got lots of electric power. If the wind's blowing, that's great too, but that can change. But at nighttime, that's when we are really closer to the line. And I'm wondering, because I presume most vehicle recharging will probably happen at night. And I don't even know if that's true, but it would be interesting to know if there's any kind of study underway addressing the future of, in terms of charging patterns and availability of electrical power to satisfy those requirements.
So Director Branscombe, that's not a question I have the answer to, unfortunately, but we can definitely look into that as staff and see if that exists and share if it does.
I don't think anybody has an answer, but I think it's an emerging issue, and it might be one you want to just put in the back burner someplace.
Director Branscombe, you are among many people that have actually been asking us recently kinds of questions around this. If we scale up on electric vehicles and how quickly, what are the implications of that, right? And I think just so you're aware, we work very closely with a lot of our utilities, SMUD in particular, of course, in Sacramento County. But we're doing quite a bit now to make sure we're all on the same page to grab any funding for the infrastructure. That, again, as Adrian says, SACOG really isn't the lead agency on the infrastructure for charging, but a lot of our partners are. I'm thinking that we might want to bring some of our partners back to the board, perhaps a lunchtime session sometime this fall, because there's money in the federal bill at the moment, although it hasn't passed yet. There's money that just came out of the state budget. And it actually, charging infrastructure is not only, you're asking the right questions, kind of big picture, but it also is one of these things where we actually have to be very coordinated across a lot of our agencies and the private sector on this one. So perhaps we can come back and try to answer some of these questions and give the board some time to sink their teeth into it.
Well, and the charging infrastructure, as important as it is, it's the availability of power generation. And I'm operating on intuition and instincts only, and doing some calculations in my head and coming to a conclusion. It could be a close case. And I think it's a wonderful objective to have electric powered vehicles. If we were in France, where 60+% of electrical power is produced by nuke plants, it's a no-brainer. It would be no problem at all. The way power is generated now, and particularly in California, it could be a real problem.
So we're happy to get back and try to figure out both how we could answer some of your questions on on the generation side and the capacity side, but also perhaps in the larger EV question.
Thank you. Those were good responses. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Director Bradscombe. Director Ledesma.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. Just wanted to say a couple things. First, thanks for the update or the overview of the program. And it's a very thoughtful approach to working with various agencies, whether it's the transit agency or the cities that are trying to innovate, trying to figure out mobility options in our respective areas about how to do this. So I want to just tip my hat to you for bringing this forward. I know it's been around, and one area that I'm as I'm thinking about it in our city is and in YCTD YOLO Bus, as one of our challenges has been around the coordination and the connection between the YOLO Bus role of the YOLO Bus routes and fixed routes versus the VIA, and how the success we continue to see with it, and how we can connect sort of the short-term, the short rides that VIA will provide to larger hubs. So you may have heard WESAC has a mobility action plan we put together, which tries to anticipate mobility hubs and moving around and start the planning process for this area. It's an area where I may ask our staff to reconnect with your staff as an opportunity to where we can learn. The hardest part for us is connecting the YOLO Bus and the VIA rides, right? Having the resources to really anticipate what those needs are. I know we have a terrific staff. I know you've worked with them before, so there's familiarity, but this is the kind of program I think we could really leverage. I do think we are in a test and learn mode. And I think we're kind of trying to get to that next level of testing and learning of how to really maximize the two areas of how YOLO Bus might work with VIA, with the bikes and the scooters as well that are prevalent in our city, and just really seeing how those connections could work. And the concept of our mobility hubs, which is where actually a bit of placemaking to where people could have a seamless experience and trying to get from one mode to the other once they walk out their door. So again, if this is the kind of program that supports those types of ventures and the learning of that, then certainly this is one where that we can connect with. So appreciate the effort here, and certainly I've already started emailing our staff to make sure we connect on this. Just want to say thank you for it.
Thank you, Director Ledesma. Great comments. Are there any questions or comments from the directors? Okay, I have a couple myself. Adrian, I wanted to ask you, did I hear you correctly? Earlier in your presentation, did you mention you guys pinged or got input from Central Texas?
Yeah, we're part of a listserv of peer agencies and entities. And so we requested peer review. We of course want input and feedback from our stakeholders, but we don't want to live in a silo in development of this. And so, yeah, we had a lot of interest from partners that are just interested in reviewing, but also partners that are doing similar work. And some agencies have looked to us in the past. Some are developing their own programs. And so it's a back and forth. So yeah, we have conversations. I wish I had more feedback to share right now, but they're active. So we have meetings with LA Metro, Central Texas Transit Authority, Contra Costa. There's a few East Coast entities that are reviewing the framework right now. So it's kind of a back and forth conversation we're having actively.
No, that's fantastic. I mean, California, I would have expected, but to hear you going beyond and even East Coast, I just commend you for that. That's great. Second question I had was in regards to, I heard earlier, you talked about supporting bike share programs, but what about ride share? I mean, does this program, can it support subsidized ride share as well?
Yeah, so that's actually the kind of core of our program, especially before 2015. We lived in this space. We call it traditional programming sometimes, but it's really our core where we started, which is employer focused ride sharing. So coordinating and encouraging information for people to share rides together to and from work. over recent years, we've tried to encourage that not just in the commute, but outside of that too, for recreational trips or otherwise. So our platform, SAC Region 511, does exactly that. It's a matchmaking tool of sorts. So it can connect people for ride sharing. It can show where park and rides are. It shows active traffic information. It shows where transit entities are, bikes, lots of information. We feel that sometimes it's underutilized and not everyone knows about the capacity of this tool, which is why we've kind of planned for this personalized trip campaign to really focus on giving a person their personalized individual trip plan, encouraging them to shift modes with incentives. Ride sharing, of course, is a part of that. So more generally, yes, we promote that tool, just one of the tools in the pocket, along with telework, biking, walking, but hopefully emphasizing trips like that through this personalized trips campaign.
Yeah, no, that's great. I'm guilty of that, as well. I mean, I'll be frank and honest. I mean, SAC 511, I don't pay much attention to. Obviously, I'm not, in that region. But my thought, or what is on my radar is much smaller. I mean, you say, COG, thank you for this. You guys already promoted the Old Town Plaza redevelopment that we have as a gathering space in an area that's very limited in terms of traffic flow. The Elk Grove Boulevard is apologize for my dog here. It's very narrow. And so when we have events there, we have increased parking there, but just the pure traffic as you go through is difficult. And my thought was, if there was a way to encourage people to, ride share, to take Uber or Lyft and get there in a cheap way. In other words, it only costs a couple of dollars for Uber or Lyft to get there for an event. That might incentivize people to do it. So it's really more focused around that. So air recreation and what you mentioned earlier, I mean, that was what I was thinking of. And if that could be one of the things for under consideration in this grant program, be excited to talk more about that with you.
Yeah, Director Soon, if I could just mention a related project. In our first Civic Lab cohort, we had a team made up of El Dorado Transit and El Dorado County and other partners focusing on Carson Road in the Apple Hill area. One of the potential outcomes of that was developing a unique app to promote all of the different farms or activities someone could go to at the cost of around $300,000. So we wanted to see what we could do there working with the team. Our platform, SAC Region 511, actually uploaded all of the destinations within Apple Hill at no cost. And so it was a system we already had and something they were able to do to provide outside of that commute trip. So that's definitely something we would love to talk about, because it sounds like something similar we did with Apple Hill.
Great, thank you. Okay, I don't see any hands up from the directors. I wanted to ask if there's anyone in the attendees that wanted to comment or any questions. I don't see any hands up, but if in case someone wanted to mention something or say something.
Doesn't look like there's any public comment.
All right, thank you, Jessica. Bring it back. I just want to, again, I just see huge benefits of this program. Disruptive technologies are just that, right? I mean, they come about very quickly, change things. And I'm thinking back to Director Branscome's comment about Henry Ford, and and before that, you had trains, and before that you had the wagon carriage. And so I think it's fantastic that as a public agency that we're trying to be innovative and assist in that disruption. So I look forward to more work on this program.
Chair Soon, can I add one final comment on,
please,
what I've been doing all morning, just to round this out. I appreciate the engagement of the board on this item, and I think the recognition of just how important this is. I also know we have some of you that are relatively new, and I think you said it really well. I just want to remind you that I think this is a great role for a regional agency, because when we did, and Adrian, Monica, and the staff worked on some of our early Civic Lab vendor fairs, right? The aggregation effect Not that you aren't all great individually as jurisdictions, but if we can aggregate all of you across this entire region, we basically provide every demographic, every kind of physical environment, urban, suburban, rural, and we begin to get the attention, right, of both national vendors and international, which we had when we did some of these vendor fairs, and we suddenly pop up on the radar where individually we don't actually get that attention. And again, a credit to the staff here. We're actually the subject now of some PhD research around putting design thinking into our transportation planning through Civic Lab and other approaches as the only or the first MPO in the country to do this. So we have not figured this out by any stretch. I'm not saying we have all the answers to our transportation challenges, but back to Director Branscom's thing about Henry Ford. And look, I've been a long-suffering transportation planner. This is one of the most exciting 5 years that I think our profession's ever had. And it's up to us to take advantage of the absolute change that's coming, but to make it work for the region, make it work for the people, make it work in a triple bottom line way for the equity, economy, environment. So anyway, you know, I appreciate the discussion. I think the questions are great. We continue to believe that we ought to be a region that is testing new approaches to all of these things and really trying to take on these challenges. And we're trying to do that in many ways through this innovative mobility program, aggregating not just all of your jurisdictions, but your staff too, and these learning cohorts. So more to come.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you, James. Very well said too. And congratulations on that recognition. That's great to hear. All right, our next item, we've got to receive and file, as Jessica mentioned earlier, or excuse me, Victoria mentioned earlier. In fact, Victoria, I'll toss it to you if you want to expand on this.
Sure. I wanted to circle back at the request of Director Jennings, who wanted to have a follow-up when we launched the Every Role in Step program earlier this year to see how things were progressing. We now have all permanent bike ped counting equipment in the hands of local agencies and are working on supporting them in installing the equipment to the best of our ability, given that we have no actual expertise in installing the equipment, but more of connecting them with the resources that they'll need to do that. And then we're very much looking forward to having that data available about the number of people biking and walking on a variety of on-road and off-road, such as trail situations. We have equipment that is well suited to a variety of environments. We have a number of agreements with local agencies that authorizes them to borrow the equipment from us, but we are working on getting more of those agreements in place. So Sacramento County has successfully borrowed counting equipment from us. Rancho Cordova and the city of Sacramento also have agreements in place. We look forward to growing that list of people who are ready to borrow bike ped counting equipment to support their transportation planning needs, and also a grant reporting requirement, especially for active transportation program, which requires pre and post bike ped counts. So if there are any questions or other comments that the members of the committee would like to share, please let me know.
All right. Thank you, Victoria. There's a receive and file for everyone. There is a lunch item. I'm going to give it to maybe James if you want to explain it. But before we do that, just want to see if there's anything for the good of the order that directors want to mention or highlight. Okay, seeing none. James, you want to tee up our lunch hour?
Absolutely. Well, if you like the appetizer for innovative mobility, well, you'll love the lunch. And so Adrian's going to be jumping in a little bit more, especially for some newer board members, a little bit more about the history. I gave some reference to our experience in Civic Lab. our desire to get some of the mobility providers up here, work with our transit agencies. A lot more of that will be shared, and Adrian will run through all of that, the informal kind of lunchtime setting at noon. I did also, while just under other matters, want to, as I put in my executive director update that was sent out yesterday, and I hope those are helpful and people are seeing them through your email. We have decided to keep the board remote through September. So we're going to be doing remote meetings for committees and the full board in September. Our hope is to see you all in person on October the 1st for that board retreat. I know you can't all make it, but we've got a critical mass, and I hope we keep that critical mass and a critical mass of actual live humans and in person. And then just finally, just a reminder too, our board meeting in August will be short by design. There will be no workshop. We will have it as a 1 hour because we have been working with GSAC to make sure during their retreat, if you're on the GSAC board, you can go from the SACOG board meeting virtually straight into your GSAC retreat. So hopefully a good example of some regional coordination there for you in a small way. And I think Casey has another update as well.
Yes, if I may. Hopefully you've all read the most recent current and seen that we have hired Christina Svensk to be our new transportation director. We are very excited to have her coming on board. She's coming from WSP and she's had experience in Southern California as well. She will be starting August 16th. And so by your September Transportation Committee meeting, she will be joining me here and we will be doing a handoff of Transportation Committee lead to her over those next couple months. So looking forward to being able to welcome her to you.
Yeah, thank you, Casey. Look forward to meeting with her and working with her as well. Okay, if there's no other comments, not seeing any.
Well, one thing.
Oh yeah, go ahead, Dr. Saylor.
Thank you very much. I just want to mention to you all that the Yolo County Transportation District will be voting. The board will be voting on Monday on the appointment of Autumn Bernstein to be our new executive director. This is following the retirement a few months ago of Terry Bassett. And Autumn is familiar to you all because of her work with ARUP and the next gen work that's come before our SACOG board. And we're very excited with her arrival and think that we're going to have an amazing team on the staff. And of course, with Director Ledesma on the board, we've got a powerhouse there as well. So we're excited and looking forward to new adventures to share with you all.
Great, congratulations on that as well. Okay, I hope to see you all at noon and have a great day. Take care, everybody. Meeting adjourned.